Always find joy in the smallest of things. That is what we found in you. Oh, 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 you are joy. Never give up when the going gets rough.
Hi, my name is Angela Ficken. I'm a psychotherapist in Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm also an online educator. And today I'm here to talk to you about cognitive behavioral therapy. What is it? How do you use it? And why is it so helpful? It's a gold standard therapy modality for treating stress and anxiety, which is what I specialize in. But before I deep dive into cognitive behavioral therapy, let me tell you a little bit about me and how I got here. So my background is in training in clinical social work, and I've worked at McLean Hospital, which is in Belmont, Massachusetts, and one of the leading psychiatric hospitals in the country. I've worked at Harvard University as a primary therapist to undergrad and graduate students, and for more than a decade I've had a private practice. And on top of that, I've created an online brand called Progress Wellness, where people can access the skills that I teach in my one-on-one sessions in a way where they don't have to see me in Boston. So no matter where you are, you can gain access to the skills I teach in my one-on-one sessions through stress management courses, COVID coping kits, stress buster guides. My goal is to really reach as many people as I can and teach the skills and strategies I do with my one-on-one clients, because these strategies work. If you're stressed and anxious, you don't have to be. There are skills that can be life-changing and empowering to help you feel better. And one of them is cognitive behavioral therapy. And that is one of my areas that I specialize in, and I'm trained and certified. So let's talk about cognitive behavioral therapy and why it's so important. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, essentially says, just because you think or believe something doesn't mean that it's true. But when something feels true, how do you know it's not true? Cognitive therapy says that our thoughts affect our mood influences our behavior increases those thoughts, and our thoughts increase our emotions, and around and around and around we go in this cycle. So if you're experiencing stress or anxiety and you're having stressful, anxious thoughts, your mood is going to be more likely stressed and anxious, and your behavior is going to be reactive to your mood. You're more likely to either maybe withdraw and avoid because you're stressed or anxious, or you're more likely to become more irritable at other people and act it outwardly. And by doing that, you ignite more stressful, anxious thoughts. So that's how the cycle goes. And when we have stressful, anxious thoughts, for example, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're thinking clearly or in reality. But because those thoughts are so powerful and can evoke such a powerful, visceral, kind of physical response, we're more likely to pay attention to them. So for example, say we're in a dark alley alone, right? Why would we be, but work with me on this. So you're in a dark alley and it's just you, a dumpster, and a couple of rats. But intuitively, you know that there's potential danger. And your brain says a message to you: I shouldn't be here, this isn't good, we need to get out of here. And your body has a physical response to that thought. Maybe there's a pit in your stomach, your heart's racing, dry mouth, your eyes are darting here and there, and you're feeling really tense. All of this physical reaction is connected to the thought of potential danger. So your legs carry you out to the well-lit sidewalk. So thank you very much, stress and anxiety, for saving your life and protecting you from danger. So this is an example of when an intensive thought evokes a significant emotional response, a physical response. Those messages connect, the brain and body message connect, and paint an accurate picture of what is. What happens when we introduce stress and anxiety, depression, anger, any hot, challenging emotion into our lives, and it lingers, it stays there, we're in it long enough, what happens is these wires start to misfire. So our thoughts start to evoke very strong emotional responses, and we feel like they connect. but they're not feeding us accurate information. You might feel like you're in a dark alley, but you're not. And cognitive behavioral therapy teaches you how to know the difference. How do you know when you're really in danger and you need to get out versus when are you thinking in a distorted way because you're feeling depressed, angry, stressed, anxious. And because of that, you're feeling bad. And because you're feeling bad, your brain then says, well, I've got to believe this. This must mean something, like I'm in a dark alley. So cognitive therapy is so important because it really helps reframe those thoughts. You don't have to stay in that negative frame of mind. Imagine there's a mountain between you and me. And the mountain is the trigger. It's the situation that's causing you some angst. And your viewpoint is from the stressed, anxious view. CBT teaches you how to come around the mountain and see the same situation from a different perspective. We can't change the trigger. We cannot change what happened. But through cognitive behavioral therapy, we can change how you think about it in a more realistic way, where it's not saturated in stress or anxiety, but through clarity and logic and reality testing, you can say, oh, I can see how I am feeling anxious, but I can also see these other perspectives. And when you do that, you start to challenge your negative thoughts. And the more you do that, the more you engage in coming around the mountain and calling it out and seeing it from a different perspective, the more easy it becomes, where what once used to make you anxious, where your negative thoughts would trip you up, no longer do in the same way, because you now know how to talk back to your thoughts, challenge your thoughts, and reality test. And that is the beauty of cognitive behavioral therapy. That does it for you. And once you know CBT and you know how to do it, you will always know how to do it. And that means that whenever you have a negative thought or a challenging thought that doesn't feel good, you have control over coming around the mountain and really seeing it in a different way to feel better. So let's go through an example. Say you're in a car and you're heading to a meeting and you left early, but despite everything, planning ahead, you are running late. In fact, you're hitting every red light. The traffic gods are against you, but then everybody else in the world has decided that they must be out at that exact hour too, but they don't have any place to be. So for some reason, not only are you hitting every red light, but everybody is driving really slow, except for you, and you have someplace to be. And you're realizing as time is ticking that you might be late. And this is a pretty important meeting that you have to attend. So you're sitting there and you have a thought, this is gonna look really bad if I'm late. I can't be late to this important meeting. I've been planning for this. The clients are gonna be upset. My boss is there. How can this be happening? Why is this happening now? What if I'm so late that I can't even do the presentation? This is going to look so bad. What if I get fired? You can instantly kind of go down the rabbit hole of negative thoughts just by the trigger of the potential of being late. And then because of the thoughts, you might notice that you're gripping the steering wheel. You're feeling more tense. Maybe you're starting to sweat. And your behavior, you might be weaving and bobbing a bit more aggressively in traffic, maybe blowing through a couple of yellow lights, hoping that you don't get caught, and taking a bit more risk just to get another inch in front of another car. Normally, behavior you wouldn't do, but because you're stressed and you're having stressful thoughts, you are now reacting and acting out that behavior. And by doing that, you are now increasing your stressful thoughts, going further down that negative, anxious, stressed rabbit hole of, this is going to look so bad. I can't believe this is my chance. I planned ahead. What am I going to say to them? They're going to be so disappointed in me. I mean, it can go on and on and on. So this is how a thought, just one thought, can cascade into other negative thoughts. And that manifests emotions, which manifest behaviors, which increase our negative thinking. So cognitive behavioral therapy, again, would take that same situation and say, how do we separate fact from fiction with this line of thinking? We can't change the traffic gods being against us. We can't change the slow pokes in the lanes next to us, but we can change how we think about it. We very well might still be late to this meeting, but getting there as a sweaty, stressed out mess is probably not in our best interest and might not be realistic in terms of what people are actually thinking about us being late. And we're not going to be thinking clearly because we're so stressed out. So you're not going to be able to make rational, logical decisions as you're thinking that you're getting fired, you're feeling more stressed, and you're weaving and bobbing in traffic. You're not thinking clearly. You're not yourself. So how do you come around the mountain with that type of example, especially when you can't change the situation and you very well might be late? One strategy that I recommend that you try is ask yourself, what would you tell your best friend in that same situation? You probably wouldn't tell your best friend, oh, you're late, like you're done, you're gonna get fired, that looks really bad. It's probably, they're gonna think that you don't care, that it's not that important. You're gonna go in and probably flub because you're so stressed. You always do this always happens to you, you can't get your act together. Like, you probably would not tell your best friend that. You probably say something more realistic and kind, like, everybody's late in their life, at least once. Nobody's perfect. And being 10, 15 minutes late isn't, a justification for getting fired. Sure, people might be a little disappointed or irritated, but you can't move, traffic lights any faster, and you can't push people out of the way. You're going to get there when you get there, and you know the material that you're going to practice and present, and you know your boss, you know the people that you're working for, you know what you want to say. And by being able to do that, to say what would you say to your best friend, you can start to notice how you feel saying those things. Your body might start to relax. Maybe you think you can start to problem solve. For example, calling ahead and saying, hey, traffic gods are against me. I'm going to be running 10 or 15 minutes late. Tell everybody to just grab an extra snack. I'll be there when I can. So when we come around the mountain and challenge the negative thoughts and slow it down, we can see the reality. Being late doesn't mean being fired. Being late doesn't mean somebody's automatically going to be disappointed. We can't control for that, but that's, we're not psychics either. We can't predict what people are going to do, but we do know that we had every intention of being there early or on time. We do know that most of us in our lifetime have been late to at least one thing, and that time and traffic and certain things are out of our control. So when we talk like that, we come around the mountain and can see it from a different perspective. And by able to engage in that type of dialogue with yourself, you start to feel better because you're thinking better. And when you think better, you feel better, you do better. So instead of weaving and bobbing in traffic and being a bit more aggressive, maybe you release some of the death grip that you have on the steering wheel. Maybe you roll down the window for a bit of fresh air. You turn on the radio just to kind of buy you some time, or you call ahead to the office and say, I'm running late, out of my control. I'll be there when I can. And then you get there. Maybe you're a little tense and nervous because you are late and you don't want to be late, but you're talking to yourself so much more nicely, more positively, and more realistically. And that's how cognitive behavioral therapy can help. When you are stressed, anxious, irritated, angry, insert any challenging, hot emotion, instead of allowing those thoughts that you have to dictate what you feel and what you do, it really is important to just take a pause and ask yourself, what would you tell your best friend? And when you can do that, you slow it down enough that you start to really challenge the negative thoughts. Just because you think or believe something doesn't mean that it's true, even if it feels true. So next time you catch yourself in negative thoughts or going down a rabbit hole and you realize this doesn't feel good, stop, ask the question, what would I tell my best friend here? Write it out, say it out loud. I would try not to do it in your head because it gets lost, especially when the negative thoughts are really strong. So writing it out can be really helpful. And look at those words, and then can you say that to yourself? If it's a fear of failing, one strategy could be to say to your best friend, failing is an opportunity for growth. Without failing, we wouldn't be able to learn. So what if you fail? Nobody's going to die. Nobody's, going to jump and, do anything. The idea is that when you have the skills to really challenge how you think and feel, you have the power to feel better. And that's why cognitive behavioral therapy is so important and so special in treating stress and anxiety. Thank you so much for having me here. I hope that you were able to learn a bit about cognitive behavioral therapy and a shortcut to it, which is coming around the mountain, challenge your negative thoughts, and always ask, what would I tell my best friend here? And that will help you come around the mountain and see it from a different perspective. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Budnik. I'm a lieutenant with the Crisis Intervention Team here at Fort Bend County. Our team is comprised of 10 deputies, 2 sergeants, and a lieutenant. Something that's a little bit different about our team is that we are focused in on training for de-escalation and also being able to recognize individuals that are going through a mental health crisis. We work in collaboration with our local mental health authority, Texana, and also our behavioral health division as well. We work with a lot of community members and community partners, as well as our local hospitals. Something you'll see a little bit different with us is that what I'm wearing today with the black polo is what our team members wear. We typically don't wear the brown uniform that the public usually sees our patrol deputies wear, just because it's a little bit less intrusive, I think, for some of our community members. They don't feel like immediately when we show up that they're going to go to jail. But we assist all of our patrol deputies, and we also assist all of our local agencies here in Fort Bend County. The types of calls that we typically go to are the ones that are going to take a little bit more time, that are a little bit more complex in nature. So that is something that's a little bit different from us, because we were able to have the focused training on de-escalating and recognizing and being able to take the time. Because we partner with our local mental health authority and also behavioral health, we also understand what other resources we have available to us for our community members. So maybe a plan that they had in the past that worked may have not worked this time around, or we need to change something up. The other uniqueness to our team is that we have a follow-up that consists of whenever any of our patrol deputies do a report that we consider high risk, we will follow up with those individuals just to make sure that they have what they need, or if they are going through a crisis at the time that we find them, we try to work out a plan for them, a plan of action for them to have a higher level of care if they're not able to have some sustainability at home. We also have a referral program with our local agencies. So if they are encountering community members within their cities that they feel are going through a mental health crisis, they will complete a referral form for our team members that gets assigned out to them, and they will follow up with those families. Our crisis intervention team has specialized training. We go through the mental health officer course, and we also have training that is put on by our local mental health authority and our behavioral health division. And we also attend training that is provided to learn how to deal with juveniles that are experiencing a mental health crisis as well. So our crisis intervention team also offers to schedule an appointment with us to meet with their loved one, so that if they ever encounter or have a mental health crisis, that they know what we look like, they're familiar with our faces and kind of how we operate and what our complete function is. So we do offer that. What we do ask is when we do go to these crisis calls to support our patrol division or our local agencies is that the family stays open and also tries to keep themselves calm and helps to provide us with any information possible. We know sometimes that when their loved one is experiencing a mental health crisis, that sometimes it's a lot to take in the information that we're giving. So we also give the same information to any family members that may be on scene, so that way they can follow up with their loved one as well. And then we will also follow up, of course, with any referrals or anything like that with the family.
I'm Sergeant Vaught. I work for the Fort Bend County Sheriff's Department in Richmond, Texas. I'm an instructor here at the Academy. My job title is to teach. Today we're going to talk about some aspects of firearm safety and talk about child safety and the laws. So the biggest thing about firearms and firearm safety is one, people having access to firearms, and there are some pretty stiff laws for allowing minors or to have access to firearms, and so the biggest key takeaway that is the storage of firearms, and it is illegal to allow a person under the age of 18 to have access to firearms. And about storage, there are a number of different ways to store firearms. Some very expensive ways, buying expensive safes and having them professionally installed into your home with different types of locks, biomechanic locks, padlocks, key locks. And then there are also some other ways to store small safes that you can put in beside your bed. But those also have gone down in price, and you can actually have those where they are biomechanics. Because the biggest thing is people want to have access to their firearms if they need them. So if somebody's breaking into your house and you can't get to your firearm, then the firearm is essentially useless. So some of the small safes that they have now, you can use fingerprint identification to access those with just a touch of your fingers, where the box will open and you have access to the firearm pretty quickly. And you can choose who you want to have access to that firearm. And that's probably one of the safest and quickest ways to store a firearm. The other part of that is the education part of things, and being over here at the academy, training new cadets or people who are attempting to get into law enforcement. A lot of times with the academy is the first time that they ever touch a firearm, and the biggest thing about firearms is there's a lot of curiosity behind them, not only in children, but as well as adults who have only seen what firearms do on TV. You know, they've never physically held one in their hand. And we here, we don't allow them to handle any firearms until they've gone through the proper training as far as on our campus and in the training aspect of things. But there's that curiosity. I mean, they'll buy firearms prior to getting a job, and that curiosity is just as overwhelming to them as it is to their children and their family members. So I believe that education is probably one of the biggest key factors to not only quelching that curiosity, but so that people can understand firearms and their capabilities. Some of the biggest things that I see is people who have children who bring firearms into their homes, and they get lackadaisical on where they store them and keeping them away from children, is that curiosity factor, and they want to see, just like their adult owners, what the firearm does, what it's capable of, how it functions. And this is where we run into a lot of problems, where accidental shooting, accidental discharges, because they're curious. I think if people would spend more time and provide the education portion to new firearms owners or kids, and explain that it's not a toy, that it causes death and destruction. But if they could explain how the firearm works, I think that would be a big step towards helping quelch the curiosity of what's behind a firearm. I have here, it's a training gun. It's one that we use in a lot of our active shooter training. It's not capable of loading a round. It is just a laser, so pulling the trigger is only going to activate 2 different lasers. And this is what we use in our training. It feels like a firearm, it functions like a firearm, but it's just a training firearm, hence the color, it's different colors, and then the slide doesn't operate in this particular model. We have other firearms that will actually chamber a marking round that shoots a soap cartridge, and we keep those and treat those just like firearms as well. But a tool like this can go a long ways in teaching or educating people in how guns function and what you can do with them. Now, obviously, this is not going to shoot a projectile. It is not going to make a loud bang. This is simply the press of the trigger just activates a laser. But this will give somebody the weight of the gun. It also gives them an opportunity to feel what it feels like to press a trigger without the consequences of what happens at the end. And I think that you could possibly teach a lot of people gun safety, as well as marksmanship with a training tool like this. And again, as I was talking before about education, that it would also go a long ways in educating a person new to gun ownership on how to operate a gun, what it feels like, and the different things that it does. And this one, it has a removable magazine. It's just weighted, so it gives the feel of what it feels like to have a magazine in the gun, and how the weight affects the firearm itself. And again, like I said, we use these for training along with some other tools that we have. But with today's world and the way people have access to modify guns and change the colors of guns, that's not an end-all, be-all indicator of that this is a training gun. And even tools like this still need to be stored properly and put away, because there's always that curiosity factor of what is it going to do, how does it act, how does it perform, and this can also teach bad training habits as well. So there's always that education portion of things.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Sandy Von Chapman. I am the founder and chief director of the Center for Brain Health and a distinguished professor at the University of Texas at Dallas. I founded the center, just to tell you a little bit about what we do here, almost 20 years ago as a research institute. Think about this, brain health was such a new concept 2 decades ago that we literally got a trademark on it, because people still do not think about their brain in health. Our brain, which is the most complex entity in the known universe, is the only part of our body that we only think about after something bad happens. A brain injury, a disease, or you're diagnosed with something. But guess what? The science of neuroplasticity tells us you can do more before anything bad happens to build capacity, to build reserve, to build resilience from the get-go. And that's really what our unique focus is, and it's unique around the world. Because even when people say we're focused on brain health, they really still are looking at what happens after something goes wrong. So that's what's unique. So I started the center. We grew from really a team of about 27 scientists, research clinicians to over 125. And from that, we were looking at how can we begin to get the rigorous science behind what it means to build brain health. So we wanted to look at brain imaging. We wanted to look at complex cognitive thinking. We wanted to look at psychological well-being, social connectedness, and really your whole real-life function. What's the science of that when people get better? And so that's what we've been focusing on for 2 decades. And now we have the science and we're translating it. So we opened the Brain Performance Institute almost 4 years ago so that we could translate it to veterans and active duty military and law enforcement officers, teenagers in school, school teachers, people everywhere. Who doesn't need better brain health? That's what we're doing. And then we opened the Brain Health Imaging Center where we're uniquely looking at markers of the brain getting stronger. So why is it, think about this, that people still have so much stigma about their brain? And you know, as we work with high-performing military, they're like, okay, from the body down, we'll build capacity, but the neck up, hey, ma'am, they say that's the no-fly zone. Because people are always afraid that you're going to tell me what's wrong with my brain. And we are what I call category breakers. We're creating a whole new category of health, a category that's defining what it means to build capacity, to build resilience, to build reserve. But if something happens and you do get diagnosed with something, how can you intercept that as soon as possible? How can you rebound from it? And how can you be the strongest version of yourself? And it's not just a small window of time, it's for the rest of your life. Neuroplasticity is the greatest gift that we've been given. And it is that our brain changes moment by every single thing that we do. That's a gift, and it's also a curse. Why is it a curse? Because guess what? About 50% of what we do is bad for our brain. So we really have to think about and know the science of what's good for our brain and what's bad for our brain. And that's what we're doing here at the Center for Brain Health. So we're defining this category of health, and it truly is kind of a higher level of category of health. You know, when people think about their brain, they're always like, well, depression, stress, anxiety. Well, that's one component. It's one silo. But brain health is so much more. It includes that, but it's more than that. It includes your clarity of thinking. It includes your psychological well-being. Fortitude is what we call it. And it also includes resilience, your social connectedness, your purpose in life, and what is it that makes you the best person of who you are. So a whole new category of health is what brain health is. And what we're doing is destigmatizing it. Instead of thinking, oh, I'm going to go to that Center for Brain Health, the people are going to tell me how bad I am, or I'm afraid you're going to tell me I don't have a brain, is what some people say, or that I'm not very smart. But every single person can be smarter than where they are now, and they can build capacity. And that's what's exciting for us, both as a scientist, a clinician, and really someone who cares about how each one of us can contribute to the world around us in the most important way possible. So we're category breakers. We're also what I would call a little bit radical. We challenge the status quo because we have been stuck far too long in this outdated notion of the brain and think IQ is fixed, or if you get a diagnosis of ADHD, it's fixed, or if you have a learning problem, it's fixed, or if you have XYZ. The individuals, and we've worked with almost 100,000 individuals now, showing that they can improve the capacity of their brain, whether in health, but also in injury and disease. And they say, I love what you all do because so many of the places we go, it's all about labeling, which disables you and it enables you. It enables you by not making you more of what you can be. But when you see what's the capacity building, you empower us.
Hello, I'm Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzales. I've served as Sheriff of Harris County since 2016 when I was elected, and I took office January of 2017. In my career, and now as Sheriff, I've understood the importance of mental health care, especially in our profession. We're normal people, but every day we experience and see abnormal things. The mental health of our workforce and people in our profession is critically important. Every day, we're used to seeing so many different traumatic incidents. It could be a fatal crash. It could be a deadly homicide scene. It could simply see a kid or a family person that's in great need. We also see industrial accidents and so many other things. Especially in the modern era, it's much more likely to see severe weather events and even industrial accidents. This can definitely take a toll. We are expected to still perform, and we're considered essential workers. We also have the added stressor of knowing that our families are at risk while we are at work because of the exposure that comes by being in a profession that has to engage closely with all members of the community. Here at the Sheriff's Office, we've tried to make sure that we break down the stigma that surrounds mental illness. We know it's important to talk about these issues and to provide resources for the men and women that serve here in our agency and also in our community. Recently, we launched the very first behavioral health unit here at the Sheriff's Office. It's a one-stop shop with personnel, trained professionals that can counsel and meet with all our staff to meet them where they're at in a safe and effective way, without judgment, and fully supportive to make sure that we're helping address whatever needs they have, both in their professional and personal lives. That's something that's very important. We also, years ago, post-Harvey, we began really implementing CISM, Critical Incident Stress Management. Now, whenever there's some type of traumatic event, whether it be an officer-involved shooting, maybe a heinous crime that was witnessed by our personnel, we make sure that we have these debrief opportunities where we encourage people, if they feel comfortable to talk about it, to go ahead and talk. The quicker we can share and talk, the better it is. In our society, we must remove the stigma that comes with mental illness. Far too often, we're seeing where it's more likely for a first responder to take their own life than sometimes the threats that they may face in the community. And so it's critically important that we break these barriers, that we say that it's okay. We're human beings at the end of the day. And it's important that we recognize that, both in policy and also operationally. For our community as well, we understand there's a lot of trauma that's often unaddressed. And so we also come up with very innovative evidence-based programs, such as our CIRT program, where we provide our deputies, our trained deputies, with an iPad where they could triage a situation, deal with someone in crisis, and connect them in real time to a mental health professional. We also have our CIRT teams, our crisis intervention response teams, where we partner a deputy and a mental health clinician that ride together as partners so that they can use those valuable perspectives, independent but together, to try to address crisis in our community. We know that in this era, more than ever, a lot of crisis surrounds us, and it's critically important that we find ways to deal with those stressors. We know that people are overworked. Again, many in our profession, first responders, are considered essential workers, and that could take a toll, the daily grind of the job, knowing that they have to confront danger every day, knowing that in these era of pandemics, that one's health is always at risk. And so I think more than ever, we got to make sure that we're finding innovative programs. Programs like core program that I mentioned with the iPad would be very useful. Telemedicine, telepsychiatry is a growing industry now. And especially in rural areas, whether you're a large metropolis like Harris County, Greater Houston, Harris County, Texas, or more of a rural area. With telepsychiatry, you're just a click away from finding the help that you need. There's so many resources out there. Don't be afraid to seek assistance and support. Again, we must remove that stigma that comes with discussing issues that in the past were considered taboo. We care. Someone always cares. We thank first responders for the amazing heroic work that they do every day, but we know that it's also not weakness to be vulnerable. We cannot give from an empty cup. We must first take care of ourselves, much as what we hear when we're flying on an airplane that say, you must first put on your own mask before you could help others. You use the oxygen first. We've got to make sure that we're taking care of our minds, bodies, and souls. So continue to seek resources and help. There's plenty out there. And please continue to take care of yourself.
Hello, I'm Sergeant Jose Gomez with the Harris County Sheriff's Office. I've been part of this agency for about 13 years. For about 10 years, almost a decade, I've been part of law enforcement and mental health combined. I was one of the first members of the Crisis Intervention Response Team, which partners a mental health peace officer with a clinician from the Harris Center for Mental Health and IDD. The Harris Center is our local mental health authority, and we have huge collaboration with them, not only out in patrol, but also within our detention bureau. With our Crisis Intervention Response Team, also known as CIRT, we respond in rural areas out in the county where we respond to mental health calls for service with the mental health nexus. Not only do we respond to calls for service within our own agency, but being the Harris County Sheriff's Office, that is the umbrella agency over Harris County, we also respond to calls for service in other jurisdictions within Harris County when they call through our dispatch. When there's a call for service in the mental health nexus, a lot of the times police officers don't really understand what is going on that scene. A mental health call for service is very complex in itself, as you're not only dealing with the individual who has the mental health issue, but also the family or other participants during that call. Deputies, when responding to a call for service like this, they usually call the Crisis Intervention Response Team. When we respond to this scene, I spent about 7 years in the Crisis Intervention Response Team. When we respond to these types of scenes, one of our responsibilities is to slow things down. Being that these calls for service are so complex, not only is the individual in crisis going through some type of crisis, but sometimes the officer, being that their adrenaline is hyped up, is also having to calm himself down at the same time trying to take control of the situation. So being part of the Crisis Intervention Response Team and responding to these situations, you're having to slow the scene down and take everybody's emotions in consideration as you're processing information at the same time. It all seems all complex, but having the assistance of a mental health professional next to us assists us in better assessing the situation out on scene. Once we are able to assess the scene and figure out what's going on and all the moving components, we'll attempt to talk to the individual in crisis and conduct what we call a mental health assessment out in the field. What is important about this program is that it offers the consumer, the individual going through this mental health crisis, an opportunity to talk to somebody else other than a law enforcement officer. They are able to talk to a mental health professional out on the scene, which they are able to calm the situation even further, because the consumer now is talking to a mental health professional and not a law enforcement officer. Being that Harris County is so massive, we used technology as a force multiplier. We created what's called the Clinician and Officer Remote Evaluation Program, also known as CORE. What we did with this, we used technology as a force multiplier out in the field to provide better assessments out in the field. So we equipped deputies with tablets, iPads, where they're able to connect with the clinician real time out in the field without having to call for a crisis intervention response team member. This not only assisted in reducing the time factor, but also leaving the crisis intervention response team to more appropriate and critical interventions where a live clinician is needed. Having the CORE program out in the field assisted our deputies in better assessing the situation and making better decisions with the assistance of a mental health professional provided through teleconferencing technology. In 2019, we conducted the pilot program of 20 deputies spread out through 5 different districts across Harris County. We analyzed about 400 calls for service, and out of those 400 calls for service, 48% of them were able to be cleared on scene because of the use of the iPad. What this means is that the deputy, when arriving on scene, understood that there was a need for a mental health assessment to be done out in the field, so they deployed the tablet, conducted the assessment, and because of the assessment done out in the field, they were able to leave that individual on scene, not having to transport him to a psych facility, a hospital, or even jail. They were able to do what we call a total diversion, leaving that individual with the appropriate resources and connecting them to our local mental health authority, which was huge for us because now we were able to have our deputy conduct an appropriate assessment, make a better decision, leave that individual on scene with appropriate resources, and then go on to the next call for service. This was massive for us as we were using technology as a force multiplier. We now have about 100 to 150 iPads at any given point out in the field, spread out through 3 different shifts. It's shown to be a very successful program as deputies continue to utilize it. Here in Harris County and across the nation, there is an issue of individuals being transported by law enforcement to local hospitals or your psych facilities because we don't know what else to do with them on scene, and there was a mental health nexus to it. We had a meeting with the local hospital a few years ago, and they said it cost about $2,000 every time we file what we call an emergency detention order when we take an individual to a hospital. Being able to provide the core program out in the field reduced the necessity of having to transport these individuals to hospitals because we were able to give appropriate resources out in the field. The other thing that we did here at the Harris County Sheriff's Office through Sheriff Gonzales is we implemented the crisis intervention training, which is a 40-hour course, to all individuals that are employed either with the Detention Bureau or Patrol Bureau or any other bureau with, can I repeat all that with the training? Okay, cut that. Okay. The other thing we did here at the Harris County Sheriff's Office under Sheriff Ed Gonzales is that we implemented the 40-hour crisis intervention training to all new hire personnel, whether they go to the Detention Bureau or become peace officers. And at the same time, we integrated what we call a new class called, I'm sorry, let me start all over again real quick. Okay. Sheriff Gonzales also implemented a new class called Integrating Communications Assessment and Tactics, ICAT. This class was developed by the Police Executive Research Forum called PERF. This is a new approach to de-escalation and recognizing somebody in crisis and the need to utilize de-escalation. We are currently implementing it across our agency and pulling all our patrol deputies back to take this class along with supervisors, so we can all be on the same page when it comes to recognizing crisis and attempting to de-escalate. Thank you. Is there anything I missed? Or anything else you want me to talk about? What about talking a little bit about Project Guardian? Just to, okay. Oh, yeah. Another program that we implemented here at the Harris County Sheriff's Office to better our response to individuals that are exhibiting some type of mental health condition, we implemented what's called Project Guardian. Project Guardian is aimed for individuals with autism. Family members or guardians can register their loved one who is diagnosed with autism through our website at www.harriscountycit.org. They're able to build a profile, and what we ask for from the families or the guardians is to give us the name of that individual who has autism, name and date of birth, de-escalation techniques that worked for that family. Who better to know the individual with autism than the family member or the guardian? And who better to understand how to de-escalate them than the family member or the guardian? So we ask in that application for de-escalation techniques, likes, don't likes, how to approach that individual with autism. And what happens with that information, we end up getting it, and we have what we call a coordinator, and the coordinator reaches back out to the family to verify all the information, and all that information gets uploaded to our dispatch system. So when an officer gets dispatched to that call or to that address, that officer is able to bring up that information, the picture of that individual, and now is better prepared to address that individual with autism and better prepared on how to de-escalate the situation. The other thing that we do is that we provide a sticker, and I don't know if you want to show that sticker. That's the sticker I showed you. I'm going to save that. Okay. The other thing that we do, once you apply and the application is verified, we send out 2 stickers, Project Guardian stickers, and this is something that they can put on their window or their door. And let's just say the deputy happens to be 30 seconds away or a minute away from the call. They're able, and they're not able to pull up the information because they happen to be real close. That sticker will alert the deputy to let him know that someone in that house is registered with Project Guardian. That way they're better prepared to handle the situation.
Hello, I'm Dr. Brenda LeVar. I'm the president of the board of NAMI Greater Houston. But what I want to talk about is NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. NAMI as an organization is more than 40 years old. We have affiliates all over the country. We have more than 300,000 members, and we are NAMI Greater Houston here locally, but our affiliates range in all the areas of the state. There are 29 different affiliates in the state of Texas alone. But NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, is really a group of families and individuals with serious mental illness who have decided to come together to do a number of things. One is to support each other. One is to be sure that there's education about mental illness. And 3, to advocate for the people who may be suffering and families who may be suffering because of the illness. So just to let you know a little bit about our advocacy work is not only at the local level, but at the state level here in Texas, because we have a state affiliate, NAMI Texas, and actually every state has an affiliate. And we have a national organization that has its main office in Arlington, Virginia. So we work at the state level, at the local level, and at the national level to ensure that those things that are most important to all of us, and there are a lot of areas of need, those things that are important to all of us are addressed. And what we do by coming together is to ensure that people feel supported, that they know that if there is one thing they're not, is alone. Because mental illness affects 1 in 5 people. That's right. If you counted 5 people sitting around you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least one of them has been affected by mental illness. So whether it was with a child, whether it was with an adolescent, whether it was with an adult, everybody has come in contact with the need for services to support individuals with mental illness. And of course, supporting their families. Because the families, like all of us that are part of NAMI, realize that it's not just that you're not alone that's important, but it's important to know where do you get access and how do you get access to the services that your particular family member needs. And now I'll turn it over to Neil Sarahan. Dr. Sarahan is our executive director here at NAMI Greater Houston to talk a little bit about the programs that we offer here.
As with many of us, our involvement with NAMI is about personal lived experience with mental illness. And when we talk about serious mental illness, a lot of times people forget about the fact that the major mental illnesses that are being experienced around the country are anxiety and depression. This is very, very important because we are living in a time when anxiety and depression are the norm. Anxiety and depression are the largest causes of timeout and loss of productivity in the business sector, and that was before COVID. So when we talk about serious mental illness, I want us to have the whole framework of schizophrenia and bipolar and depression and anxiety, and to understand that in this culture we are enormously challenged. All of us are vulnerable, and we are enormously challenged at this time with the mental balance that all of us need to proceed in our life.